for the point, line, plane, apply assignment. Now, if you didn't complete the Explorer and you don't have images to use for this assignment, you can find some sample images to use. If you go under Files in Canvas and go to Apply Files, and then go to Prepared Files, this zipped folder here has several different files you can use. Just be aware that if you do use these images that you won't receive the 2 points of prepared credit for this apply exercise. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message. Anyway, so we're going to get started, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually use Adobe Illustrator. We're going to build on some of those skills. We're going to create a new document. And this new document is going to be 8 inches by 8 inches. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually create multiple artboards. So we're going to create 3 artboards in our 8-inch by 8-inch document. So when it opens here, you can see I've got 3 different artboards. And we're going to use 3 of these images and start to explore the shapes that are created in our environment. By tracing over some of those shapes and starting to add some color value to them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to File, Place, and one thing about this is whenever you're adding images to Illustrator, it will let you click and drag those images into Illustrator, but it's best that you File, Place. Don't copy and paste. Don't click and drag in. And the reason that you don't want to do that is because it's not going to give you the options you need to be able to embed or associate that placed image with your Illustrator document. So you need to get in the habit of going to File, Place. So now I'm going to find where I've got those images. I've got several of them. Let's see which ones I want to use. So I'm going to use this stair image, and I'm going to hit Place, and then if I click and drag, it'll size it to the artboard. So you want to make it the size of the artboard. I'm going to find another one, File, Place. Let's see, we'll do, I'm just hitting space on the keyboard and I can see that preview a little bit larger. So I'm going to select Bump here. Now if I click once, you can see that the actual image is sized a little bit smaller. And it's okay to size the image larger because we're just using it as a template for this. So I'm going to hold the Shift key down when I'm clicking and dragging, and the Shift key will make sure that it maintains proportion. So if I don't hold the Shift key down, you can see how it stretches or distorts the image. So I'm going to hold the Shift key down and then let go of the mouse and then the Shift key. And my mouse kind of scrolled over there, so I hit Command 0 on the keyboard and it got me back over to where I needed to be. I'm going to do Command minus, and then I'm going to do one more image here. We'll find one that has a little bit more interesting shapes to it. Let's do this one right here, this architecture one. And then I'm going to click and drag and make it that same size as this box, my artboard. So now I've got these 3 different images placed on the 3 different artboards. What I want to do now is I want to actually lock that layer. So if you don't see your layers over here, it looks like 2 different pages on top of each other. If I click on that, you can see this layer here. I'm going to actually lock this layer. So just next to this eyeball, if I click on that lock, that means that I can't add anything to these layers. I don't accidentally move these images out of the way because they're our template. Now I'm going to click on this little page, and this page is going to create a new layer. And whichever layer was selected, that layer will be created right directly above that. So think about if you had several pieces of paper cut out, and if you put something on top of it, that becomes that new layer. And this is the layer we're going to work on to start to add our shapes. So now I've got a layer to work on, and at this point what I'm going to do is I'm going to save my document. So you can do Command S, or you can go File, Save. We'll call it Point, Line, Plane, and I'm going to save it to my desktop. You can click and drag or click this drop down, or if you don't see those settings, it's this little caret arrow, and you can show or reveal those. And I actually used a keystroke, Command D on the keyboard, to go right to the desktop. And I'm going to save it as an AI file. And it's always best to save your file in the same folder as your images, just so that you know where those images are. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to identify some of these shapes. I'm going to start with this kind of little stair step here. And so what I want you to do is not really think about the image that it's creating, but think about the shapes that are being built with the shadows and the different planes and the different points and lines in the image. So I'm going to actually trace over this shape here. Now you can choose to use your rectangle tool, or you can choose to use the pen tool. I'm going to use the pen tool. So I'm going to click in one place, and just like your pen tool exercise, you can hold the shift key down if you want. I'm not going to, because this is a little bit more organic than that. And then you click and trace around those shapes. Now if you notice, it's got the default fill of white with the stroke of black. And I'm going to actually remove that fill here. And I'm going to actually do something else, is so I can identify this line. I'm going to make it kind of an extreme color. So if I click and drag, and I'm just going to make it like a bright, I don't know, orange or something like that, or red, so that way I can see that shape. Now I'm going to deselect, and you can deselect by either hitting Command on the keyboard and clicking to the side, or you can get the regular selection tool and click to the side. So now I've got one shape selected here, and I'm going to start to go and trace over some of these other shapes. So it looks like there's a shape that's created by this shadow, and if you notice, I'm just creating different shapes. So I'm going to do another shape here that's created by this shadow, and what I can do is I can modify those points. And you can go back to your direct selection arrow to click on just one of those points and move just one of those points after the fact. Now there's one actually kind of handy trick that if you set your pen tool up right before you start, you'll be able to use a modifier key to make this a little bit easier. So if you select your direct selection, which is this white arrow, first, and then select your pen tool, when you're clicking and dragging, what you can do is if you hit the command on the keyboard, you notice it turns into that direct select. So what the command key does is it goes back to that last tool. So if I had the regular selection tool selected, and if I hit command, it would use that. But I like the direct select, because then I can go back and I can hit command even when I'm actively working on a shape, and I can modify those shapes. Now the other modifier key that's helpful is if you hit option, it converts it into the convert anchor point tool, so I can actually click and drag. So that's the option or alt key. And then I can finish that shape out. Now it's important that you actually join those shapes together. So if you notice and I'm going to hit delete on the keyboard, here I actually have these shapes overlapping, but we want them to overlap, and you want to complete that squared off shape. You don't want to just do a line here, because when you start to fill your shapes with color, it won't fill that entire shape. So I'm going to continue here and identify some other areas. Just hit command on the keyboard, hit spacebar to move around. Looks like there's another shape here. And we've got another one. So I'm going to go through here and start to create all of my areas. Got another shape. And then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start to assign some colors to those. And you can choose to use the colors from the image. You can create a more monochromatic color scheme. And another thing that you're going to want to start to do is you're going to want to start to layer some of those shapes. So it looks like I have another shape here that has a bunch of like it's a big white area, and I'm actually going to go down underneath here and follow the steps, and this is going to make sense, a little bit more sense in just a minute. So I'm just going to put it underneath this area. Okay, so now I've got several shapes identified, and now I'm going to want to fill them with color. And so let's say I wanted to fill these with maybe yellows instead of whites. So the way that you can start to pick some of those colors is we've got the color picker here, and then we've also got some swatches. I'm going to actually pull this swatch tablet out, or palette out, and then I'm going to go back to my color and I'm going to pull these colors out, and we're going to look at these dialog boxes a little bit further. So here it's got some standard swatches that you could use, and then this one right here, it has kind of this rainbow gradient here, and it doesn't really allow you to modify those colors very much. And what you need to do is you need to show options. So click on this little menu here, show options, and then what it does is it gives you the color variations, or the CMYK color build if you made a CMYK document. So you can start to change these colors. Now that's kind of a little bit of a crapshoot, because you may not know exactly what colors you need to be able to build the color you want. Now you can pick through this area here to choose some colors as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take my different areas and I'm going to assign maybe some variations of these yellows and oranges here. So I'm going to select this area right here, and I'm going to fill it. So I've got to make sure my fill is in front, because right now my stroke is in front. So if I click on the fill, it'll bring that to the front, and I'm going to fill it with one of these colors. And we don't want to have any strokes or outlines, so I'm going to actually remove that stroke. So now we've got this orange color here. And then this is a darker color, so I could perhaps use this shade darker, and then there's another place I can remove the stroke over here, or you could do it up here, so there's multiple places. And then I want to use this same color here because it matches that in tone on my image. Now I could go over here and select that same orange, but a quick way to do it is to get this eyedropper tool over here on the left hand side. So I click on that eyedropper tool, and with this shape selected, I click on the other shape that I want to match the style. So what it did is it chose that orange fill and it removed the stroke, so it matched that. So I could probably do that same thing on several of these other shapes. So we're going to do that. And then it looks like this may be a little bit lighter tone from this. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to use the eyedropper tool and get that color. And then what we're going to do is we're going to lighten this color a little bit. Now there's a couple of different ways you can do that. And what you want to do is you want to get in the habit of changing the tint of the color. And we'll learn a little bit more about tints and shades later on. But the tint of the color is actually adding white to the color. Now most people may just go up here to opacity and change the opacity, and it seems to lighten the color. But if you notice, you can start to see the image between underneath it. That is it adds an element of transparency to the image, and we don't want to add a transparent nature to the color. We actually want to add white to that color. So I'm going to hit undo. Now, where we would actually do that is we would actually do it in this color palette right here. But if you notice, it's just got color sliders, and we want to be able to adjust the amount of white that's in here. The way we want to adjust the amount of white is if you look at our swatch over here, if I double click on that swatch, it brings up this dialog box, and if you notice, it says process color, which means it's a process of building that color with these 4 different colors. So in the color type, we're going to convert it to a spot color. Now this spot color, if I hit OK, you'll notice that this dialog box changes and it's 100% of that color down to 0% of that color. Now if I change that slider, it'll give me a lighter version of that color. So then what I can do is I can adjust that variation there. So I'm going to do the same here, fill it with that color. I'm going to hit Command on the keyboard and it actually swaps back and forth from my eyedropper tool to my regular selection tool, and I can select something. Now I've got this background right here, which I want it to be a lighter color. So we're going to select this color, we're going to remove the fill, and then we're going to make this an even lighter color. So I'm going to put maybe 50%. But if you notice, I'm missing some of my shapes. And the reason I'm missing some of my shapes is because I drew that larger shape after the shapes before, the smaller triangle shapes. And so what we need to do is we need to rearrange where they are in relationship to each other. And so what you can do is you can actually look in your layers here, and I'm going to pull this menu out. And if you notice this little arrow here, if I click on that arrow, it shows me all of the shapes that are actually in that layer. And there's a couple of different methods that you can use. This is one method, but I can actually select this layer and I can click and I can drag that layer underneath the other ones. And so I can move this shape back into space, into place. And maybe I want this layer to be in the very back. So now I've got that, that layer behind all the rest. Now another way that you can do it is, let's say I drew another shape. I'm just going to draw a shape here. And I want it to move backwards. Instead of clicking and dragging, which that might be the way you want to do it, what you can also do is you can right click or control click if you don't have right click set up. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to go down here to arrange. And what you can do is you can send it all the way to the back, so it goes all the way behind everything. And if you notice, it moved all the way to the back here. Or you can arrange it and watch what happens in the layers over here is you can send backwards and it jumps one layer behind. And if you notice, there are also keystrokes associated with that. And I typically use these keystrokes, the command left bracket, right back bracket. That's my method that I use to order things. And so you can choose whichever method you want, but that's how you can arrange things in the different layers. So I'm going to delete that. And then what we want to do is we do want to kind of clean some of these shapes up a little bit as we start to identify these different areas. So I'm going to actually draw another shape here, and I'm going to actually flip to my outside outline instead of having it fill so I can see my shape. So if you click on this little double arrow, it'll swap back and forth. It'll put the fill into the stroke and vice versa. So I've got that, and I'm just going to trace this shape here. And if you notice, we've got a little bit, and actually I'm not going to go around that. I'm changing my mind. I'm just doing Command Z to undo. And I'm going to do a shape on top of that. And what I want you to do is just kind of experiment with how to build those shapes and what layer to build those shapes on and what colors might make sense for those shapes. Now, so I'm going to actually create these little kind of broken areas. We've got another shape here. Looks like we've got probably another shape there. And I'm just using the pen tool, and as you get more comfortable with it, and this actually has quite a few square shapes. And then I've got this other big area, and I'm actually gonna make one big shape underneath here and send it to the back. Okay, so now I've got, and it looks like I'm missing an area here, and I'm missing an area here. So we'll add these shapes. And don't be afraid to undo or to start over, delete the shape that you've made or modify the shape that you've made. You can always go back in and adjust things. And I haven't saved for a while, so I'm going to save Command S to save my document. Another thing is, let's say you don't want to use orange. You can actually use that color picker as well to fill these shapes with the color from the image. So I'm going to get my eyedropper here, and then if I just click on that image, you notice it fills it with that. And so I'm going to actually send that shape to the back using my keystroke command left bracket. But that's really not going to work for me yet because I still want to get this color here. And I'm going to flip that back, so I can always convert these back in just a second. So it's just to the outline. So this may be the method that you want to use if you feel like you want to have the colors from the photograph. So I'm going to, just so I can see what's going on, I'm flipping that color back. Here we're going to flip these so I can see the color underneath. So, and if you notice, I'm flipping back and forth between tools by hitting the command key on the keyboard. So I'm going to select that, select this one, fill it with that, select that shape, fill it with that. Here I can convert that back over because I've got that shape filled. So this one I can convert back over. Actually, looks like I still need to do this shape. So again, I just did underneath. Let's see, this shape right here. Gotta make sure I get the right shape selected. Then I can send that. And actually, I'm gonna hide that for just a second so I can fill that shape with that color. And then I can make sure I get the right shape selected. So, see. And when in doubt, you might have to kind of click around there. I've got that shape selected so you can find that edge. This one right here, I'm going to find that color. This one, find that color. And if you want to do multiple shapes, what you can do is you can get the regular selection tool and select multiple shapes. And maybe you remove the fill for just a minute. Remove the fill here. Maybe, gotta make sure I get it selected. And then I can select that shape and fill it with this color, this shape with that with that color. So you can kind of see the process that's involved in identifying those shapes. So, and I know I've got a shape here, and you gotta make sure you select that edge of that shape, and then this one needs to go to the front. So I just use the keystroke to bring it to the front, and then I've got this last shape, and then this one right here. So if you notice, I've got all of those different shapes identified, and then you may want to tweak some of these colors. This feels a little bit brown. Maybe pull another color out of another area. You notice there's a little bit of a slice of this background color right here, so I'm going to actually just move this line in just a little bit. And then if you want to see it without that background image, let's see if I can get that area. And then you want to see it without that background image in it, what I can do is I can show in my layers, and I click on this little eyeball and it hides those background images. And then I can go in and I can clean up these shapes so that they go right to the edge. But if you notice, it starts to create its own graphic image. Now I'm trying to make this snap to where I want it to be and line up, but if you notice, it's kind of popping back and forth. And the reason it's doing that is I probably have one of these snap to grid or snap to point. So if you go to view, and I'm going to uncheck snap to point. And if you notice, I also have my smart guides off. So the smart guides kind of highlight things as you go over them and try and help you align things. So if you notice those pink lines that show up, I tend to turn those off because they're distracting to me. It's totally up to you if you get used to them and you want to use them, but if you want to turn them off, you can go under View and Smart Guides and turn those guides off. But then what I want you to do is go in and really kind of dial in these shapes so that they line up with each other and they make sense in terms of the actual image that you're tracing. So you may want to go back in and to all these different points and clean up where they align. Okay, so I've got one here that needs to be cleaned up just a little bit. And I may want to adjust the darkness of this or this right here. I don't really like that color. And I don't really like that color, so I'm going to make it something like one of these darker colors. So now we've got one finished. So I can turn these back on, and then what I want you to do is to go ahead and go through that same process on the other two. And this one right here, I think this probably needs to be a little bit darker. So if you notice in this color picker, I can add a little bit of black to kick that shape back a little bit. So I want you to do it on the 3 different images. And once you have those images created, this front, all the shapes created on top of it, I want you to make sure and save your AI file and then hide this layer, the second layer that has your template images, and then save this file as a press quality PDF. So once you get here where it says AI, choose PDF, hit save, and then go to where the PDF presets are, go to press quality, and then hit save PDF. And then that's the file that you'll upload to Canvas. Hopefully that's enough. There was quite a bit of information in that. Let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.